The hanging body swayed in the morning breeze as Vivian Daniels stood among the crowd, her fingers white-knuckled around the worn leather journal that would soon condemn her. The year was 1878, and Benton, Wyoming was a town that had grown prosperous through the cattle trade, and the nearby silver mines prosperous enough to hide its uglier truths beneath a veneer of respectability that Vivian had been foolish enough to challenge. "The evidence speaks for itself," Mayor Wilcox announced, his voice carrying across the town square as he held up several pages torn from Vivian's journal. "Miss Daniels has recorded transactions proving embezzlement from the town treasury by none other than our own sheriff, Collins, a man who died defending this town from outlaws." The crowd murmured angrily. Sheriff Collins had been beloved, his funeral just 2 weeks prior attended by nearly everyone in Benton. No one wanted to believe he'd been stealing from them for years, least of all his widow, who now shot daggers at Vivian with tear-filled eyes. "Furthermore," the mayor continued, "she has slandered several upstanding businessmen in our community with unfounded accusations of corruption." Vivian stepped forward. "They aren't unfounded. The ledgers I found in the sheriff's office show clearly that—" "Silence," Mayor Wilcox thundered. "The town council has reviewed your so-called evidence and found it to be fabricated. You've always been too nosy for your own good, Miss Daniels, questioning things that don't concern you." Vivian's father had been Benton's newspaper editor until his death last year. She'd taken over the small printing press, continuing his tradition of honest reporting. When she discovered discrepancies in the town's financial reports while researching an article, she'd never imagined it would lead to this. "This town has no place for troublemakers spreading lies," Wilcox declared. "The council has voted. Vivian Daniels, you are hereby banished from Benton. You have until sundown to collect your belongings and leave. Should you ever return, you will face imprisonment." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Banishment was rare, almost unheard of. Vivian searched the faces of people she'd known her entire 22 years of life. Neighbors, friends, people whose children she'd taught to read at Sunday school, all looking at her with suspicion or turning away in shame. Only Mrs. Holloway, the elderly widow who ran the general store, approached her as the crowd dispersed. "This isn't right, Vivian," she whispered, pressing a small cloth bundle into her hands. "I believe you, but I can't help more than this. They're too powerful." Vivian nodded numbly, clutching the bundle she knew contained some food and likely what little money Mrs. Holloway could spare. "Where will you go?" the old woman asked. "I don't know," Vivian admitted. Benton was the only home she'd ever known. Her parents were buried here. The newspaper office that had been her family's livelihood for 2 generations was here. "Perhaps Cheyenne." Mrs. Holloway squeezed her hand. "Go to Silverdale. It's 3 days' ride northwest. My sister lives there. Tell her I sent you." 3 hours later, Vivian stood outside her small home for the last time. She'd packed what she could on her mare: penny clothes, her father's pocket watch, a photograph of her parents, and a few precious books. The printing press and everything else would be seized by the town. Just as she was about to mount, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her turn. A tall figure on horseback emerged from the afternoon shadows: Lucas Thornton, who ran the livery stable on the edge of town. At 26, Lucas was known as one of the finest horsemen in the county, having worked as a cowboy on several cattle drives before settling in Benton 2 years ago. "Miss Daniels," he said, tipping his hat. His expression was unreadable beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. Vivian stiffened. "Have you come to make sure I leave, Mr. Thornton?" "No, madam. I've come to ride with you." She blinked in surprise. "I beg your pardon." Lucas dismounted, leading his chestnut stallion closer. Those accusations you made about the mayor and his business partners. They're true. I've suspected something wasn't right for months. How would you know? I overhear things at the stables. Men talk freely when they think no one's listening. He adjusted his horse's saddle. Last month, I caught Wilcox and Judge Parker discussing how to divvy up land seized from farmers who couldn't pay suddenly inflated taxes. Vivian's heart raced. That's exactly what I found in the ledgers. When I confronted them, they threatened me. His jaw tightened. Said they'd frame me for horse theft if I didn't keep my mouth shut. So why help me now? You're risking everything. Lucas looked toward town, his profile sharp against the setting sun. Because my father taught me that a man who stands by while injustice happens is no man at all. He turned back to her, green eyes meeting hers. And because I've been planning to leave anyway. This town is rotting from the inside. Vivian studied him. Lucas had always been polite during their brief interactions in town, but they'd never been more than passing acquaintances. Still, she'd heard nothing but good about his character. Where were you planning to go? She asked. Silverdale. Vivian couldn't help but laugh, the sound strange after the day's events. Mrs. Holloway just recommended the same destination. A smile tugged at his lips. Good woman, Mrs. Holloway. Silverdale's growing and they need a good stable master. I've been corresponding with the town council there. He hesitated. I heard them say they're also looking for someone to run their newspaper. Hope fluttered in Vivian's chest for the first time that day. We should leave now, Lucas said, glancing at the sun. We can make it to Cottonwood Creek by nightfall. It's safer than camping in the open. Why would you help me? Vivian asked again, needing to understand. Lucas mounted his horse with the easy grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. Because it's the right thing to do, and because no one should have to make this journey alone. As the sun began to set behind them, Vivian Daniels rode away from the only home she'd ever known, the dust of Benton settling on her skirts one last time. Beside her rode Lucas Thornton, a man she barely knew but whose presence already made the uncertain road ahead seem less daunting. They rode in silence for the first hour, the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a bird the only sounds accompanying their journey. The road narrowed as they left the well-traveled paths near Benton, winding through scrubby hills dotted with sagebrush and juniper. Were you able to bring much with you? Lucas finally asked, breaking the silence. Vivian patted the bulging saddlebags. Some clothes, a few personal items. The most important thing. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound book. My father's printing manual. Everything he taught me about running a newspaper is in his notes here. Lucas nodded appreciatively. Smart. Skills and knowledge weigh nothing but are worth everything out here. What about you? She asked, noticing he traveled light with only 2 saddlebags and a bedroll. Tools of my trade, some clothes, my mother's Bible. He patted the rifle in its scabbard. And this. Not much else I need. The simplicity of his words struck Vivian. Her entire life had just been reduced to what she could carry, yet this man seemed perfectly content with even less. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the landscape, Lucas guided them off the main trail toward a stand of cottonwoods that marked a small creek. We'll camp here, he said, dismounting and offering a hand to help Vivian down. She hesitated briefly before accepting, aware that this was the first of many times she would need to rely on this near stranger. His hand was calloused but gentle, steadying her as her feet touched the ground. I'll see to the horses if you'd like to gather some firewood, Lucas suggested. Vivian nodded, grateful for the task. The physical activity helped quiet her mind, which had been racing with questions and worries since the morning's events. By the time she'd collected an armful of dry branches, Lucas had unsaddled the horses and set up a small camp. With practiced efficiency, he built a fire and soon had coffee brewing in a small pot. From his saddlebag, he produced some jerky and hard biscuits, which he shared with Vivian. "It's not much," he apologized, "but we can hunt tomorrow if we need to." "It's fine," Vivian said, accepting her portion gratefully. "Mrs. Holloway gave me some provisions as well." She reached into her bag and pulled out the bundle, which contained dried apples and a small jar of honey. Lucas smiled. "That improves our meal considerably." They ate in companionable silence as darkness settled around them. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow over their small camp. Above them, stars began to appear, brilliant against the deep blue of the night sky. "It's beautiful out here," Vivian murmured, looking up. "I've never been this far from town before." Lucas poured her another cup of coffee. "The open country has its own kind of magic. I spent 5 years driving cattle through territories where you could ride for days without seeing another soul." "That sounds lonely," Vivian observed. He considered this. "Sometimes, but there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I felt more isolated in Benton these past months than I ever did on the range." Vivian wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I understand that. After my father died, people treated me differently. A woman running a newspaper. It made them uncomfortable. When I started asking questions about the town's finances, it got worse. People fear what challenges their comfortable beliefs," Lucas said. "Your father was respected, so they tolerated his occasional hard questions. But they expected me to sell the newspaper and find a husband," Vivian finished for him, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "Their loss is Silverdale's gain, then." His simple vote of confidence warmed Vivian more than the fire. "Tell me about Silverdale," she requested. "What have you heard?" Lucas stretched his long legs toward the fire. "It's newer than Benton, built after silver was discovered in the hills nearby about 7 years ago. Unlike many mining towns, it didn't bust when the easy silver ran out. They've developed other trades: lumber, cattle, even some farming in the valley. The mayor is a former schoolteacher who's determined to build a civilized town." "That sounds promising," Vivian said cautiously. "From what I've gathered, they're progressive-minded. They already have a small school and they're building a proper courthouse." He looked at her across the fire. "A newspaper would fit right into their plans." Hope and uncertainty warred within Vivian. "If they'll have me." A woman publisher banished from her previous town hardly makes for an impressive introduction. "The truth will serve you well there, I think," Lucas said. "Besides, we don't have to tell them everything right away." Vivian was struck by his use of "we," the casual way he'd aligned himself with her cause. It was strangely comforting. As the fire burned lower, Lucas spread his bedroll on one side of the camp and helped Vivian arrange hers on the opposite side. "I'm a light sleeper," he assured her, sensing her unspoken concern about camping alone with a man she barely knew. "If anything or anyone approaches, I'll wake. Try to get some rest, Miss Daniels. We have a long ride tomorrow." "Vivian," she said suddenly. "If we're to be traveling companions, please call me Vivian." He nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Good night then, Vivian. Sleep well." "Good night, Lucas." As she lay beneath the vast canopy of stars, Vivian realized that for all the upheaval and injustice of the day, she felt an unexpected sense of freedom. Benton had become a cage of expectations and corruption. Whatever lay ahead, however uncertain, at least she faced it on her own terms. With that thought, she drifted into sleep, the sound of Lucas's steady breathing across the dying fire oddly reassuring in this wild, unfamiliar night. Morning came with the chittering of birds and golden light filtering through the cottonwood leaves. Vivian awoke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up to find Lucas already tending a small fire, a pot of coffee brewing. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Caught a couple of trout for breakfast." He gestured to two fish cooking on flat stones at the edge of the fire. Vivian ran a hand through her tangled hair, suddenly conscious of her appearance. She must look a fright after sleeping outdoors. "There's a bend in the creek just through those trees," Lucas said, seeming to read her mind. "Private enough if you want to freshen up. I'll keep breakfast warm." Gratefully, Vivian gathered her small bag of toiletries and made her way to the creek. The water was cold but refreshing as she washed her face and hands. She managed to tame her auburn hair into a neat braid and changed her blouse, feeling somewhat more prepared to face the day. When she returned to camp, Lucas had the fish plated on tin dishes alongside some hard biscuits. The simple meal tasted better than anything Vivian could remember eating recently. "How far do you think we'll get today?" she asked as they packed up camp. Lucas studied the sky, which was clear and bright. "With good weather, we should reach the Miller homestead by evening. Sam Miller's a friend, he'll let us sleep in his barn." "You seem to know this route well," Vivian observed. "I've made the trip to Silverdale twice in the past year, exploring opportunities there." He secured his bedroll behind his saddle. "The first day out from Benton is the riskiest. We're still in territory where Wilcox has friends." The reminder of her banishment sent a chill through Vivian despite the morning sun. "What do you think they'll do with my father's newspaper?" Lucas's expression darkened. "Probably sell it to someone who won't ask uncomfortable questions. Or just shut it down entirely. All those years of my father's work." Vivian swallowed hard. "I couldn't save any of the printing equipment, not even the press that's been in our family for 2 generations. Lucas finished saddling her horse before answering. "Sometimes we have to leave things behind to move forward. Doesn't make it any easier, though." As they mounted up and continued their journey, the terrain gradually changed. The scrubby hills gave way to more open country, with patches of wildflowers dotting the grassland. In the distance, blue mountains rose against the horizon. Their destination lay somewhere beyond them. They rode side by side when the trail allowed, and Vivian found herself studying her companion. Lucas sat easily in the saddle, his broad shoulders relaxed, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. There was something comforting about his quiet vigilance. "How did you come to Benton?" she asked, realizing she knew very little about him beyond his reputation as an excellent horseman. "Chance, mostly," Lucas replied. "I was working cattle drives from Texas up to Wyoming. After 5 years on the trail, I was looking to settle somewhere. Benton needed someone to take over the livery when old Mr. Simmons decided to retire." "And your family?" A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my mother to influenza when I was 16. My father died 2 years later, accident at the sawmill where he worked in Missouri. I headed west after that with nothing to keep me there." "I'm sorry," Vivian said softly. "It's hard, isn't it, being the one left behind?" Lucas glanced at her, something in his expression softening. "Your parents, they were good people. Your father's newspaper was the only honest voice in Benton." "You read it," he nodded. "Every issue. Your editorials these past months have been even more direct than his were." Vivian felt a flush of pride mixed with sadness. "I thought if people knew what was happening with the town's money, they'd demand answers. I never expected." "The mayor and his friends have been stealing from Benton for years," Lucas said grimly. "They weren't about to let a young woman with a printing press expose them. Sheriff Collins probably would have stopped them if he'd known, which is why they were quick to tarnish his reputation along with yours." "Did you know him well?" "Well enough to know he was an honest man. Not perfect, but not a thief." Lucas adjusted his hat against the strengthening sun. "The real question is how far Wilcox's influence reaches. We'd best be cautious until we're well beyond Benton's sphere." Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses near a small stream. Vivian stretched her legs, which were already aching from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle. Lucas pretended not to notice her stiffness, preserving her dignity. They shared a simple lunch of jerky and dried fruit. As they were preparing to continue their journey, the distant sound of hoofbeats caused Lucas to tense. "Get on your horse," he said quietly, helping Vivian mount quickly. "Follow the stream into those trees. Wait for me there." "What about you? I'll see who it is." Could be nothing, but better safe than sorry. Vivian wanted to protest, but recognized the wisdom in his caution. She guided Penny along the stream and into the shelter of a grove of pines, her heart pounding. Through the trees, she could see Lucas casually adjusting his saddle, appearing unhurried as three riders approached. She couldn't hear their conversation, but recognized one of the men as Deputy Fletcher from Benton. The other two were strangers to her, rough-looking men who sat their horses with the easy confidence of those accustomed to hard travel. The conversation seemed tense, but not openly hostile. After a few minutes, the riders continued down the trail, and Lucas watched them go before turning toward the trees where Vivian waited. "Bounty hunters," he said grimly as he rejoined her. "Fletcher hired them to track down the Sullivan gang. At least, that's what they claim." "You don't believe them?" Lucas's expression was troubled. "Fletcher asked too many questions about whether I'd seen a woman traveling alone. Said they were concerned for the safety of any travelers with the Sullivan gang in the area." A chill ran down Vivian's spine. "They're looking for me." "Possibly, or it could be legitimate concern." He didn't sound convinced. "Either way, we should avoid the main trail for a while. I know another route. It's rougher terrain, but will keep us away from other travelers." They spent the next several hours picking their way through more rugged country, sometimes having to dismount and lead the horses through rocky passages. Despite the difficulty, Vivian didn't complain. The fear of being found and dragged back to Benton, or worse, kept her moving forward. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered, and the air felt heavy with the promise of rain. Lucas led them down into a small valley, where a modest homestead came into view, a log cabin with a barn and corral, smoke rising from the chimney. "The Miller place," Lucas explained. "Sam's a good man. Moved out here after the war to start fresh." As they approached, a tall man with a graying beard emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. Upon recognizing Lucas, his stance relaxed, and he raised a hand in greeting. "Lucas Thornton. Didn't expect to see you out this way." His gaze shifted to Vivian, curiosity evident. "Sam, this is Miss Vivian Daniels," Lucas said as they reached the yard. "We're traveling to Silverdale and hoping you might have space in your barn for the night. Storm's coming." Sam Miller studied Vivian for a moment before nodding. "Any friend of Lucas is welcome here. My wife will be pleased to have another woman to talk to. Gets lonely out here for her sometimes." As if summoned, the cabin door opened, and a plump, pleasant-faced woman appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. "Martha," Sam called, "we have guests for supper." Martha Miller proved to be as welcoming as her husband. She ushered Vivian inside with motherly concern, clucking over her travel-worn appearance. "You poor dear, you must be exhausted. Let me heat some water so you can wash properly. Dinner's nearly ready: venison stew and fresh bread." The simple cabin was spotlessly clean, with colorful quilts and dried flowers adding touches of warmth. For the first time since leaving Benton, Vivian felt something like normal life reassert itself. While Martha helped Vivian freshen up, the men saw to the horses. Through the small window, she could see Lucas and Sam talking seriously by the barn. She wondered if Lucas was explaining their situation. Her suspicion was confirmed at dinner when Sam said carefully, "Lucas tells me you're starting fresh in Silverdale, running from some trouble in Benton." Vivian tensed, but Martha laid a gentle hand on hers. "You don't need to explain, dear. We know something about leaving difficulties behind." "Sam fought for the Union," Lucas explained, "when he returned to his home in Tennessee after the war. Neighbors who'd sided with the Confederacy made it clear we weren't welcome anymore," Sam finished. "Our barn was burned, signs were posted. We got the message." "I'm sorry," Vivian said sincerely. Sam shrugged. "Worked out for the best. Wyoming's been good to us." "No neighbors for miles, just how I like it." Martha rolled her eyes affectionately. "He says that, but he rides 15 miles to play checkers with old Peterson every Sunday." The meal was the most delicious Vivian had eaten in days, and the Millers' easy hospitality gradually helped her relax. After dinner, while the men smoked pipes on the porch, Martha showed Vivian a small room off the kitchen. "You'll sleep here tonight," she insisted. "Lucas can take the barn." "I couldn't impose nonsense. A young woman needs proper privacy." Martha's kind eyes crinkled. "Lucas is a good man. One of the best I know. But propriety matters, especially when you're starting over somewhere new." Vivian understood the unspoken concern. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller." "Martha, please." She patted Vivian's hand. "Whatever drove you from Benton, I hope you find better in Silverdale. It's a growing place with good people." That night, as rain drummed steadily on the cabin roof, Vivian lay in a real bed for the first time since her banishment. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Every crack of thunder made her think of the hanging body that had greeted Benton that fateful morning, a petty thief whose public execution had drawn the crowd where her own life would unravel hours later. Would justice ever come to Benton? Or would Mayor Wilcox and his corrupt allies continue to prosper at others' expense? And what awaited her in Silverdale? Opportunity, or just another place where a woman alone would face suspicion and limitations? The only certainty in her uncertain future was the steady presence of Lucas Thornton, a man who'd chosen to risk his own standing to help her. As lightning illuminated the small room, Vivian realized with startling clarity that she was already coming to depend on him in ways that both comforted and unsettled her. Morning brought clearing skies and renewed energy. After a hearty breakfast of flapjacks and bacon, Sam pulled Lucas aside for a private conversation while Martha pressed a bundle of food into Vivian's hands. "For the journey," the older woman insisted. "And this too." She handed Vivian a small knife in a leather sheath. "A woman should always be able to protect herself." Vivian accepted the gift gratefully, securing it in her boot as Martha showed her. When the men returned, Lucas's expression was grave. He waited until they were mounted and had bid farewell to the Millers before explaining. "Sam heard news from a trader passing through yesterday. There's a $200 reward being offered in Benton for information leading to your return." Vivian's blood ran cold. $200. That's a lot of money, Lucas finished. "More than most folks around here see in months." "Mayor Wilcox is claiming you stole town funds before fleeing." "That's absurd. He's the thief, not me." "I know. But it means we need to be even more careful. Sam suggested we avoid Riverford entirely. It's a small trading post we'd normally pass through tomorrow." Word of the reward will have reached there by now. They rode in tense silence for several miles, each lost in thought. The landscape grew more rugged as they began to climb into the foothills of the mountains that separated them from Silverdale. "Those men yesterday," Vivian finally said. "Do you think they were actually bounty hunters looking for me?" Lucas considered this. "Hard to say. If Fletcher already knew about the reward, possibly. But they continued on rather than doubling back, which suggests they might actually be tracking the Sullivan gang. Who are they? You mentioned them before. 3 brothers who have been robbing stage coaches and small banks across the territory. Nasty business. They killed a guard in their last holdup near Casper. The conversation lapsed as they navigated a particularly steep section of trail. By midday, they had climbed high enough to look back over the vast expanse they'd traveled. Benton was somewhere beyond the horizon now, too distant to see. "It's beautiful," Vivian murmured, gazing at the panorama of rolling plains giving way to mountains. "That it is." Lucas's voice held a note of reverence. "This country gets in your blood. For all its hardships, there's something about this wild land that calls to certain souls." "Is that why you stayed out west after your father died?" He nodded. "Back east, everything felt confined. Too many people, too many rules that didn't make sense. Out here, a man is judged more by what he does than who his family was or how much money he has." "Unless you're a woman," Vivian said with a hint of bitterness. "Then you're judged by whether you know your place." Lucas looked at her thoughtfully. "Some places are changing. Silverdale granted women the right to vote in town elections last year." Vivian's eyes widened. "Really? That's progressive," he finished with a smile. "Like I said, it might be a good fit for you." They continued their journey through increasingly forested terrain. Lucas explained they would camp that night in a hidden valley he knew, then take a seldom-used pass through the mountains the following day. "It's a harder route than going through Riverford, but safer given the circumstances." As the afternoon waned, Lucas grew more alert, frequently scanning the forest around them. When Vivian asked what was wrong, he hesitated before answering. "Probably nothing. Just a feeling we're not alone." His wariness proved justified when, an hour later, they rounded a bend in the trail to find 3 men on horseback waiting in a small clearing ahead. Vivian's heart sank as she recognized Deputy Fletcher among them. "Well now, look who we have here," Fletcher called out, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "Miss Daniels, you're a long way from Benton." Lucas positioned his horse slightly in front of Vivian's. "Afternoon, Fletcher. Thought you were tracking the Sullivan gang." "Changed plans when I realized who I'd encountered yesterday." Fletcher's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mayor Wilcox is mighty concerned about Miss Daniels. Seems she absconded with town funds before her banishment." "That's a lie," Vivian said firmly. "Mayor Wilcox is trying to silence me because I discovered his corruption." The 2 men flanking Fletcher, the same rough characters from yesterday, exchanged looks. "Folks in Benton see it differently," Fletcher drawled. "Got a sworn statement from the town council about your theft. And a nice reward for your return." "She's not going back to Benton," Lucas said, his voice calm but resolute. Fletcher's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, Thornton. You're outnumbered. Besides, this doesn't concern you. I'm making it my concern." Vivian could feel the tension crackling in the air. Her hand inched toward her boot, where Martha's knife was concealed. "3 against 1, Thornton," Fletcher warned. "And I've got the law on my side." "Do you?" Lucas challenged. "Your jurisdiction ends at Benton's borders." "We're well beyond them now. I've got papers authorizing me to bring her back to face charges. Papers signed by a corrupt mayor aren't worth the ink wasted on them." Fletcher's patience visibly frayed. "Last chance, Thornton. Stand aside." "Not happening." What followed unfolded with frightening speed. Fletcher went for his gun, but Lucas was faster, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. Fletcher cried out as the bullet struck his shoulder, causing him to drop his weapon. The other 2 men had their guns out now. One fired, the shot going wide as Lucas urged his horse forward. Vivian pulled Martha's knife and threw it with desperate aim at the nearest attacker. By sheer luck, It struck his gun hand, causing him to howl in pain and drop his pistol. Lucas had closed the distance to the third man, who was struggling to control his spooked horse while aiming. A quick exchange of gunfire followed, and the man slumped forward, blood spreading across his shirt. "Go!" Lucas shouted to Vivian, turning his horse back toward her. "Ride for the tree line." She didn't hesitate, spurring Penny toward the dense forest at the edge of the clearing. Lucas was right behind her, firing once more over his shoulder at Fletcher, who was struggling to mount his horse one-handed. They galloped headlong into the forest, branches whipping past as they urged their horses to unsafe speeds through the trees. Only when they'd put considerable distance between themselves and their pursuers did Lucas signal to slow down. "Are you hurt?" he asked breathlessly, scanning her for injuries. "No," Vivian managed, her heart still pounding wildly. "You grazed my arm, nothing serious." He glanced back the way they'd come. "We need to keep moving. Fletcher will come after us as soon as he can." "You killed that man," Vivian said, the reality of what had just happened beginning to sink in. Lucas's expression was grim. "He was aiming to kill me and to drag you back to a town that would probably hang you once Wilcox finished framing you for theft." He checked his wounded arm, which was bleeding through his sleeve. "I don't take killing lightly, Vivian, but sometimes there's no choice." They continued riding at a brisk pace, following game trails deeper into the forest. Lucas seemed to know these woods, guiding them unerringly despite the lack of clear paths. As daylight began to fade, he led them into a narrow canyon concealed by dense vegetation. "We'll rest here," he decided, dismounting carefully, wincing as the movement jarred his injured arm. "Fletcher won't find this place, especially in the dark." Vivian slid from her saddle, her legs trembling with exhaustion and fading adrenaline. "Let me look at your arm." Lucas didn't argue, allowing her to help him remove his jacket and roll up his sleeve. The bullet had torn a furrow along his upper arm, painful but not deep enough to cause serious concern. Using water from their canteens and strips torn from a clean petticoat in her saddlebag, Vivian cleaned and bandaged the wound. Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked, the reality of their situation weighing heavily upon her. "Thank you," Lucas said quietly when she'd finished. "For this, and for your quick thinking back there. That knife throw probably saved my life." "I was aiming for his chest," Vivian admitted with a shaky laugh. "I've never thrown a knife before." That earned a genuine smile from Lucas. "Remind me never to underestimate you, Miss Daniels." They made a cold camp that night, unwilling to risk a fire that might attract attention. Huddled in their bedrolls beneath the stars, they spoke in whispers about their next steps. "We should reach Silverdale by tomorrow evening if we push hard," Lucas said. "Once we're there, Fletcher will have less influence." "Silverdale's marshal is Jim Harker. He's a fair man who won't simply take Fletcher's word over ours. What if Wilcox sends proper warrants, or comes himself?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll face it together. But from what I know of Harker, he'll want evidence, not just accusations. And Wilcox can't provide any real evidence of theft because you didn't steal anything." "I just wish I'd brought proof of his corruption," Vivian lamented. "You have your journal, don't you? With your notes about what you found." Vivian sat up, realization dawning. "Yes. And I copied some of the most damning figures directly from the ledgers." "That might be enough to at least raise questions," Lucas said. "Especially if Harker sends inquiries to the territorial governor." For the first time since fleeing Benton, Vivian felt a glimmer of hope that justice might eventually prevail. She settled back into her bedroll, acutely aware of Lucas just a few feet away, his breathing steady in the darkness. "Lucas," she whispered, "thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come with me." In the dim starlight, she could just make out his profile as he turned toward her. "Get some rest, Vivian. Tomorrow we reach Silverdale and you can start rebuilding." As sleep finally claimed her, Vivian's last conscious thought was that perhaps, in losing everything, she had found something unexpectedly valuable, a true ally in this dangerous, beautiful wilderness. They rose before dawn, breaking camp in the gray light that preceded sunrise. Lucas's arm was stiff but functional, and he insisted the wound looked better than it felt. After a hasty breakfast of hardtack and dried beef, they mounted up and continued their journey. The mountain pass Lucas had chosen was indeed challenging. Narrow trails wound between towering pines, sometimes disappearing entirely as they crossed rocky terrain. By midday, they'd reached the highest point, pausing to rest the horses and take in the breathtaking view. From their vantage point, they could see the vast wilderness they'd traversed, and in the distance, a green valley nestled between lower mountains, their destination. "Silverdale," Lucas confirmed, pointing to a tiny cluster of buildings just visible in the valley. "We should be there by sunset." Vivian stared at the distant town, emotions warring within her. Fear, hope, determination all swirled together as she contemplated her uncertain future. "What will you do when we get there?" she asked Lucas. "Check on that stable master position I mentioned. The owner's looking to retire." He adjusted his hat against the midday sun. "What about you? Will you pursue the newspaper, if possible? I'll need to find the capital to purchase printing equipment." She trailed off, the practical challenges suddenly overwhelming. Lucas seemed to sense her doubt. "One step at a time. First, we get there safely. Then we find lodging and make introductions. Opportunities will follow." The descent from the pass proved faster but more treacherous than the ascent. Loose shale made footing uncertain for the horses, forcing them to dismount and lead the animals down particularly steep sections. By late afternoon, however, they had reached gentler slopes, and the valley opened before them. They were riding through a pleasant woodland, perhaps 2 hours from town, when Lucas suddenly reined in his horse. "Riders coming," he warned, head cocked toward the sound of approaching hoofbeats. "Could be nothing, but let's not take chances." He led them off the trail into a dense thicket where they waited, barely breathing, as a group of riders passed. Vivian caught glimpses of 5 men, heavily armed, moving at a steady trot toward the pass they'd just descended. "Sullivan gang," Lucas whispered once they'd passed. "Those were the brothers in front. I recognized them from wanted posters." Vivian's eyes widened. "The ones Fletcher was supposedly tracking." Lucas nodded grimly. "Ironic, isn't it? If he hadn't been so fixated on capturing you, he might have actually caught the real criminals he was sent after." They waited several more minutes before emerging from their hiding place and continuing toward Silverdale. The encounter had been a stark reminder that dangers in this territory came in many forms. The sun was setting, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as they finally rode into Silverdale. The town was smaller than Benton but well planned, with wide streets and substantial buildings that spoke of prosperity and permanence. A large sign welcomed visitors. "Silverdale, founded 1871, a town of progress and opportunity." "Where should we go first?" Vivian asked, suddenly self-conscious about her travel-worn appearance as townspeople glanced curiously at them. "The Silverdale Hotel," Lucas decided. "It's respectable, and the owner's wife is Martha Miller's cousin. We can get cleaned up, have a proper meal, and figure out our next steps." The hotel proved to be a handsome 3-story building near the center of town. As they dismounted in front, Lucas took both horses' reins. "You go ahead and secure rooms. I'll see to the horses at the livery down the street." Vivian hesitated, suddenly reluctant to be separated from him after days of constant companionship. "I'll be right back," he assured her, seeming to understand her anxiety. 20 minutes at most." With a nod, Vivian gathered her courage and entered the hotel. The lobby was modestly elegant with polished wood floors and comfortable furnishings. At the desk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes greeted her. "Welcome to Silverdale, miss. I'm Eleanor Simmons, proprietress of the hotel. How may I help you?" "I need 2 rooms, please," Vivian said, suddenly conscious of her dwindling funds. "My traveling companion will be along shortly." Mrs. Simmons studied her with interest. "You've come a fair distance by the look of you. Business or pleasure brings you to Silverdale?" Vivian hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "A new beginning, I hope. I'm interested in the newspaper opportunity I've heard might be available." The woman's expression brightened. "Oh, you must be a journalist then. We've been hoping to attract someone with newspaper experience. The town council has been discussing the need for a local paper for months." "Yes, I ran my father's newspaper in." Vivian faltered, unsure whether to mention Benton. "Your timing is providential," Mrs. Simmons continued, not noticing her hesitation. "My husband is on the town council. He'll be delighted to meet you." Just then, the hotel door opened, and Lucas entered, looking relieved to see Vivian engaged in apparently friendly conversation. "Ah, and this must be your traveling companion," Mrs. Simmons observed. "Yes, Lucas Thornton," he introduced himself with a polite tip of his hat. "We've had a long journey from Wyoming territory," Vivian interjected quickly. "Several days on the trail." If Mrs. Simmons noticed the vague answer, she didn't comment. "Well, you both look like you could use a hot bath and a good meal. We have 2 rooms available on the 2nd floor connected by a shared sitting room, if that would suit." The arrangement was perfect, respectable, yet convenient. After securing the rooms and arranging for baths to be prepared, they were shown upstairs by a young porter who carried Vivian's saddlebags. The rooms were simple but clean and comfortable, a welcome luxury after days on the trail. In the shared sitting room between them, a fire had been lit to ward off the evening chill. "I'll have dinner sent up in an hour," Mrs. Simmons promised. "You must be exhausted." When she'd gone, Vivian sank into one of the chairs by the fire, the events of the past few days catching up with her. "We made it," she said quietly. Lucas nodded, taking the chair opposite her. "So we did, but our troubles aren't necessarily over. You think Fletcher will follow us here, eventually, once he tends to his wound and regroups." Lucas stared into the fire. "But we have time to establish ourselves before that happens. And as I said, Marshal Harker isn't likely to act without evidence." A knock at the door announced the arrival of hot water for their baths. For the next hour, they each retreated to their respective rooms to wash away the dust and weariness of their journey. Vivian luxuriated in the steaming tub, reflecting on how quickly life could change. Less than a week ago, she'd been a respected newspaper editor in the only town she'd ever known. Now she was a fugitive, hundreds of miles from home, putting her trust in a man she barely knew yet somehow felt she could rely on completely. After her bath, she dressed in her cleanest remaining clothes, a navy blue skirt and white shirtwaist. She'd just finished arranging her damp hair into a simple knot when another knock heralded the arrival of dinner. A young maid set up a small table in the sitting room, laying out a feast that made Vivian's mouth water: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and a berry pie for dessert. When Lucas emerged from his room, Vivian was momentarily taken aback. Freshly shaven and dressed in clean clothes, with his damp hair neatly combed, he looked younger and even more handsome than she'd realized. The rugged cowboy she'd traveled with had transformed into a gentleman who wouldn't look out of place in any respectable establishment. If he noticed her surprise, he didn't comment on it. Instead, he held her chair as she sat for dinner, the small courtesy touching after the hardships they'd shared. They ate with the hearty appetite of those who have known real hunger, their conversation light as they savored each bite. When they'd finished and the maid had cleared away the dishes, they lingered by the fire, neither quite ready to retreat to the solitude of their separate rooms. "Tomorrow we should meet with Marshal Harker," Lucas suggested. "Better he hears our side of the story before Fletcher arrives making accusations." Vivian nodded agreement. "And I should inquire about the newspaper opportunity while it's still available." "You should know," Lucas said carefully, "that I've been corresponding with Silverdale's mayor about both the stable and the newspaper. I mentioned I knew someone with newspaper experience who might be interested." Vivian looked at him in surprise. "You never said." "I wasn't certain you'd want to leave Benton," he admitted, "until circumstances forced the issue. So you've been planning your move here for some time, since I realized how deep the corruption in Benton runs." His expression darkened. "When Sheriff Collins died and Wilcox appointed Fletcher as deputy, I knew it was time to leave. Fletcher's been in Wilcox's pocket for years." Vivian contemplated this new information. "And now you've risked everything to help me escape." "I'd have left anyway," Lucas said with a shrug that didn't quite convey the nonchalance he seemed to aim for. "Helping you was the right thing to do, still." She met his gaze across the firelit space between them. "Thank you, Lucas. I won't forget it." Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, that their connection had deepened beyond mere traveling companions. Before either could acknowledge it, however, a sharp knock at the door interrupted. Lucas rose to answer, hand instinctively moving toward where his gun would normally be holstered. He relaxed slightly when the visitor proved to be a messenger from the town marshal. "Marshal Harker's compliments," the young deputy said, handing Lucas a folded note. "He requests your presence at his office tomorrow morning at 9. After the deputy left, Lucas unfolded the note and read it with a frown. "What is it?" Vivian asked. "Apparently, we were seen entering town. Someone recognized me from my previous visits and informed the marshal that I've arrived with a companion." He handed her the note. "He doesn't mention any messages from Benton, but it seems word travels fast in Silverdale." Vivian read the brief note, which was polite but clearly an official summons rather than a friendly invitation. "Do you think we're in danger?" Lucas considered this. "No, Harker's a cautious man but fair. He's probably just curious about new arrivals, especially given the Sullivan gang's activities in the region." "I hope you're right," Vivian said, unable to completely quell her anxiety. "We should get some rest," Lucas suggested. "Tomorrow will be a pivotal day for both of us." As they said goodnight and retreated to their separate rooms, Vivian found herself strangely reluctant to close the connecting door completely. The past days of constant companionship had created a bond that made solitude feel suddenly foreign. In the unfamiliar comfort of a real bed, she stared at the ceiling, thoughts swirling. What would tomorrow bring? Would Marshal Harker believe their story? Would she find a place for herself in this new town, or would her past in Benton follow her here too? The only certainty in her uncertain future seemed to be Lucas Thornton, a man who'd risked his life for her, who'd shown her kindness when she needed it most. As sleep finally claimed her, Vivian realized with startling clarity that somewhere along their dangerous journey, Lucas had become more than just her protector. She was falling in love with him. Morning in Silverdale brought clear skies and renewed purpose. After breakfast in the hotel dining room, Vivian and Lucas made their way to the marshal's office. located in a sturdy brick building that also housed the town jail. Marshal Jim Harker proved to be a tall, lean man in his 40s with a weathered face and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He greeted Lucas with a firm handshake. "Thornton, wondered when you'd make good on your letters about relocating here." His gaze shifted to Vivian. "And this must be Miss Daniels." "How did you," Vivian began. "Know your name?" Harker gestured for them to sit. "Telegram came through yesterday from Deputy Fletcher in Benton. Quite a story he tells about you too." Vivian's heart sank. "Whatever he's accused me of," Harker held up a hand. "I didn't ask you here to make accusations, Miss Daniels. I've known Lucas by reputation and correspondence for over a year. When a man like him risks his neck for someone, I figure there's more to the story than what a deputy with a bullet in his shoulder might claim." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you for being willing to listen, Marshal." For the next hour, they recounted everything the corruption Vivian had uncovered in Benton, her banishment, their journey, and the confrontation with Fletcher and his hired guns. Lucas explained his own suspicions about Benton's leadership that had led him to plan his departure well before Vivian's situation arose. Harker listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When they'd finished, he leaned back in his chair, considering. "Fletcher claims you stole $200 from the town treasury and that Thornton here is your accomplice. Says you shot him and his deputies when they tried to lawfully apprehend you." "That's absurd," Vivian said firmly. "I never took a penny. I have my journal here with notes copied directly from the town ledgers showing the real theft by Mayor Wilcox and his cronies." She produced her journal, turning to the pages where she'd meticulously recorded discrepancies in Benton's finances. Harker studied them with interest. "I'm no accountant, but these figures don't add up right, that's plain enough." He closed the journal, handing it back to her. "What were you planning to do with this information before they ran you out of town? Publish it in my newspaper. Let the people of Benton decide for themselves if they wanted to keep such men in power." Harker nodded thoughtfully. "Bold move. Not surprising they wanted you gone." He turned to Lucas. "And your part in this?" "I was already planning to leave," Lucas explained. "When I heard what happened to Vivian, I couldn't stand by and let them railroad her. Even though it meant becoming a fugitive yourself." Lucas met the Marshal's gaze steadily. "Some things are worth the risk, Marshal." Something in Harker's expression softened. "I know something about taking stands that cost you, Thornton." He rose from his desk. "Here's how we'll proceed. You two are welcome in Silverdale, provided you cause no trouble. If Fletcher or anyone else from Benton comes with warrants, I'll have to consider them, but I won't act without evidence I can verify." "Thank you, Marshal," Vivian said, relief evident in her voice. "Don't thank me yet," Harker warned. "Your troubles aren't over. Men like Wilcox don't give up easily when their secrets are threatened." He moved to the door. "Now, I believe Mayor Edwards is expecting you both at his office. Seems he's quite interested in a newspaper for Silverdale, and in finding someone to take over the livery stable since old Jenkins is set on retiring." As they left the Marshal's office, Vivian felt as though a great weight had been lifted. They weren't completely safe, but they had found an ally in Marshal Harker and potentially a new beginning in Silverdale. Mayor Benjamin Edwards proved to be everything Mayor Wilcox was not: forthright, enthusiastic, and genuinely concerned with his town's progress. A former schoolteacher who'd come west for his health, Edwards had been elected mayor 3 years prior on a platform of managed growth and civic improvements. "A newspaper is exactly what Silverdale needs," he declared after Vivian explained her background. "We're growing rapidly, new businesses opening monthly, families settling in the valley. People need to know what's happening in their community." I have experience running all aspects of a small town paper, Vivian told him. My only obstacle is acquiring the necessary equipment. Edward smiled. As it happens, we've anticipated that. The town council set aside funds to purchase a printing press and basic supplies. We were simply waiting for the right person to operate it. Vivian could scarcely believe what she was hearing. You mean the town would own the equipment? Initially, yes. But we've structured a plan whereby the operator could purchase it over time through a portion of the paper's revenue. Eventually, it would be yours entirely. It was more than she could have hoped for. That's incredibly generous, Mayor Edwards. Not generous practical. Silverdale needs a voice, and you need a fresh start. His eyes twinkled. Marshal Harker filled me in on your situation this morning. Sounds to me like Benton's loss is our gain. While Vivian discussed specifics of the newspaper arrangement, Lucas met with Jenkins about the livery stable. By afternoon, both had tentative agreements in place. Lucas would work alongside Jenkins for a month before purchasing the business, and Vivian would begin setting up the newspaper office as soon as the printing equipment arrived, expected within 2 weeks. As they walked back to the hotel, both slightly dazed by how quickly their prospects had improved, Lucas suggested they celebrate. The Silver Palace restaurant serves the best steak in the territory, according to Jenkins. Shall we have dinner there tonight? Vivian hesitated, suddenly aware of her limited wardrobe. I'm not sure I have anything suitable. Then perhaps we should remedy that first. Lucas nodded toward a shop across the street with fashionable dresses displayed in the window. Silverdale may be smaller than Benton, but Mrs. Wilson's Dry Goods is supposed to rival any shop in Denver. The suggestion that he would help her purchase new clothes brought a blush to Vivian's cheeks. Lucas, I couldn't possibly let you consider it an investment in Silverdale's new newspaper editor, he said with a smile. Besides, I've been saving for my move here for months. I can afford to help a friend start fresh. Friend. The word both warmed and disappointed her, though she quickly admonished herself for the latter feeling. Lucas had already done far more for her than friendship required. At Mrs. Wilson's shop, Vivian selected a practical working wardrobe, 2 skirts, 3 shirtwaists, and the necessary underpinnings along with one special item. A deep green dress with delicate lace trim that Mrs. Wilson insisted matched her eyes perfectly. When Lucas insisted on paying for everything despite her protests, Mrs. Wilson gave them a knowing smile that only deepened Vivian's blush. That evening, dressed in her new green gown with her hair arranged in a more elaborate style than she'd managed in days, Vivian felt almost like her old self again as Lucas escorted her to dinner. The Silver Palace was indeed Silverdale's finest establishment, with crisp white tablecloths and actual crystal glasses, unexpected luxuries in a frontier town. To new beginnings, Lucas proposed, raising his glass once they were seated. And to unexpected journeys, Vivian added, touching her glass to his. The meal was everything Jenkins had promised: tender steaks, fresh vegetables from local gardens, and a berry cobbler that rivaled Martha Miller's. Throughout dinner, they discussed their plans for settling in Silverdale, the conversation flowing easily between them. The apartment above the newspaper office is small but should suit me well enough, Vivian said as they lingered over coffee. And you, will you live at the livery? Jenkins has a small house behind the stable that's included in the purchase. Lucas studied her face in the soft lamplight. It's strange, isn't it? A week ago, neither of us knew what the future held. Now we're about to become business owners in a town we barely know. Life can change in an instant, Vivian agreed, for better or worse. In this case, I'd say for better. His expression grew more serious. "Vivian, there's something I should tell you." Her heart quickened at his tone. "Yes. When I first saw you standing in that crowd in Benton, about to be banished for telling the truth no one wanted to hear, I admired your courage. When I rode out with you, it was because I believed in your cause." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. But somewhere between Benton and Silverdale, it became about more than principle. Vivian held her breath, afraid to hope she understood his meaning. "I know it's too soon," he continued. "We've only just arrived here and both have businesses to establish. But I wanted you to know that I care for you as more than a friend or traveling companion." "Lucas," she began, her voice softer than she intended. Whatever she might have said was interrupted by the arrival of Mayor Edwards and his wife, who stopped by their table to welcome them again to Silverdale. "Mrs. Edwards and I would be delighted if you both joined us for Sunday dinner this weekend," the mayor offered. "It would be a good opportunity to introduce you to some of Silverdale's leading citizens." They accepted the invitation graciously, but the moment for personal revelations had passed. As they walked back to the hotel through Silverdale's quiet streets, a comfortable silence fell between them. The unspoken hung in the air, neither quite ready to pursue the conversation that had been interrupted. At the hotel, Lucas escorted Vivian to her door. "Good night, Vivian. Sleep well." "Good night, Lucas." She hesitated, then added softly, "Thank you for today, for everything." He smiled, the warmth in his eyes saying what words had not yet fully expressed. "Tomorrow's a new day in our new town. I'm looking forward to it." As Vivian prepared for bed, she found herself smiling at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time since leaving Benton, she felt a true sense of hope, not just for her professional prospects, but for the possibility of something she'd never expected to find on this journey: love. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Vivian threw herself into establishing the Silverdale Sentinel, working closely with Mayor Edwards to secure a modest building on Main Street for the newspaper office. The printing press and related equipment arrived as promised, and Vivian spent long days setting up the operation. Lucas, meanwhile, worked alongside Jenkins at the livery stable, learning the specifics of the business while already implementing improvements. In the evenings, they often met for dinner, sharing the day's events and planning for the future. Word of their arrival had spread quickly through Silverdale's social circles, helped along by their appearance at the Edwards Sunday dinner. Far from the suspicion Vivian had feared, they were welcomed warmly by the town's residents, who seemed genuinely excited about both the newspaper and the livery's revitalization under new ownership. "It's strange," Vivian commented to Lucas one evening as they walked after dinner. "In Benton, I always felt like an outsider, even though I was born there. Here, where we're actually newcomers, I already feel more at home." "Silverdale's different," Lucas agreed. "There's an energy here, people building something together rather than a few powerful men controlling everything." As they strolled past the nearly completed newspaper office, Vivian paused to admire the freshly painted sign. The Silverdale Sentinel, Vivian Daniels, editor and proprietor. "I still can't quite believe it," she admitted. "A month ago I'd lost everything. Now you're about to launch a newspaper that this town needs desperately," Lucas finished for her. "The first issue comes out next week, correct?" "Yes, and I'm terrified," Vivian confessed with a laugh. "What if no one wants to read it?" "They will." Lucas's confidence was unwavering. "Half the town has already asked me when they can place advertisements or announcements." His support had been constant throughout these weeks of transition. Though both were busy with their respective businesses, Lucas found time each day to check on Vivian's progress, often bringing lunch or offering to help with physical tasks around the newspaper office. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper than friendship, though neither had explicitly defined it. The interrupted conversation from their celebration dinner remained unfinished, both seemingly content to let their connection develop naturally amid the demands of establishing themselves in Silverdale. The morning, the first issue of the Silverdale Sentinel was to be distributed dawned clear and bright. Vivian had worked late into the night, setting the final type and ensuring everything was perfect. Lucas had stayed with her, helping to run the press and fold the papers, refusing to leave until the job was complete. Now, as Vivian arranged the newspapers on the counter of her office, ready for sale, she felt a nervous excitement she hadn't experienced since taking over her father's paper in Benton. The first customer arrived promptly at 8 o'clock. Mrs. Simmons from the hotel. "I want the honor of purchasing the very first copy," she declared, placing her coin on the counter with a flourish. "This is a historic day for Silverdale." A steady stream of customers followed, many staying to congratulate Vivian and comment on the paper's professional appearance. By noon, nearly every copy was sold, and orders for subscriptions filled several pages of her ledger. Lucas arrived just after the lunch hour, his smile widening as he took in the nearly empty newspaper rack and Vivian's flushed face. "Looks like the Sentinel is a success," he observed. "Beyond my wildest hopes," Vivian agreed. "I've already had requests for more advertisements than I can fit in next week's issue. Then we should celebrate. Again." He produced a small basket from behind his back. "I thought perhaps a picnic. The weather's perfect, and there's a lovely spot by the creek just outside town." The suggestion was tempting. The office should stay open until 5. Surely Silverdale can survive without its newspaper editor for one afternoon. "Especially since you've clearly already served most of the town today." Vivian needed little convincing. Within half an hour they were riding out of town, the picnic basket secured behind Lucas's saddle. The spot he'd chosen was indeed beautiful, a grassy bank beside a clear creek, shaded by cottonwoods whose leaves rustled gently in the breeze. Lucas spread a blanket while Vivian unpacked the basket, revealing a feast of cold chicken, bread, cheese, and a bottle of wine. "This is wonderful," she said, settling on the blanket. "I didn't realize how much I needed to escape the office until this moment." "You've been working too hard," Lucas observed, pouring wine into 2 tin cups, the best approximation of proper glasses he could manage for a picnic. "Though I understand the drive. The livery's been consuming all my waking hours as well." They ate contentedly, discussing their respective businesses and the characters they'd encountered in Silverdale. When the meal was finished, they sat side by side, watching the creek's gentle flow. "Have you heard anything more from Marshal Harker about Benton?" Vivian asked, the question that was never far from her mind. Lucas nodded. "Fletcher returned there after our encounter. Apparently, he's been telling quite a tale about being ambushed by us unprovoked." Vivian's stomach tightened. "And the marshal believes him?" "No. Harker received a more official communication from Mayor Wilcox demanding your return to face charges, but he's stalling, requesting additional evidence before acting." Lucas smiled slightly. "I suspect our marshal is more interested in justice than in doing Wilcox's bidding." "I still worry," Vivian admitted. "What if they send someone else after us, or come themselves? Then we'll face it together." Lucas took her hand, his expression serious. "Vivian, do you remember what I started to tell you that night at the Silver Palace?" Her heart quickened. "Yes. I meant every word. These weeks in Silverdale have only strengthened my feelings." His green eyes held hers. "I'm falling in love with you." "I think maybe I started falling the moment you stood up to Wilcox in that town square," refusing to back down even when facing banishment. Vivian felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "Lucas, you don't need to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I know it's soon and we're both establishing ourselves here. I just wanted you to know how I feel." "I was going to say," Vivian continued with gentle determination, "that I'm falling in love with you too. Somewhere between Benton and here, between you risking your life for me and bringing me picnics, it happened without my even realizing it." The joy that spread across Lucas's face was worth any uncertainty the future might hold. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Vivian closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find you," he murmured. "When I planned to leave Benton, I thought I was just seeking a more honest town. Instead, I found the most honest person I've ever known." They lingered by the creek until the sun began its descent, talking about everything and nothing, sharing hopes and memories. As they packed up the remains of their picnic, a contentment settled over Vivian that she'd never experienced before, a sense that whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. Riding back toward town in the golden light of late afternoon, Vivian noticed a rider approaching rapidly from the direction of Silverdale. As he drew closer, she recognized young Tommy Harris, who helped at the telegraph office. "Miss Daniels, Mr. Thornton." The boy called, reining in his horse. "Marshal Harker sent me to find you. Says it's urgent, you need to come to his office right away." Lucas's expression tightened. "Did he say what it's about, Tommy?" "No, sir. Just that he needed to see you both before sundown." "Said it was about visitors from Benton." Vivian's blood ran cold. The peaceful interlude by the creek seemed suddenly distant, the reality of their precarious situation rushing back with brutal clarity. "We'll go directly to the marshal's office," Lucas assured the boy. "Thank you for bringing the message." As Tommy rode back toward town, Lucas turned to Vivian. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together. Remember that." She nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence as they urged their horses to a faster pace. Marshal Harker was waiting for them, his expression grave as they entered his office. To Vivian's surprise, Mayor Edwards was also present, along with a distinguished-looking gentleman she didn't recognize. "Glad Tommy found you," Harker said, gesturing for them to sit. "We have a situation developing." "Visitors from Benton?" Lucas asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Mayor Wilcox himself, along with Deputy Fletcher and 2 other men," the marshal confirmed. "They arrived an hour ago, demanding I arrest Miss Daniels immediately for theft and you for aiding a fugitive and shooting a lawman." Vivian's hands clenched in her lap. "And will you?" "No," Harker said firmly. "I told them I required proper evidence before taking any action, which led to quite a heated exchange. They're currently at the hotel, supposedly gathering their documentation. They won't have any real evidence against Vivian because she committed no crime," Lucas pointed out. "We know that," Mayor Edwards interjected. "Which is why I took the liberty of telegraphing the territorial governor's office when we first learned of your situation. That's where Mr. Harrison comes in." The distinguished gentleman extended his hand to Vivian. "William Harrison, special investigator for Governor Hoyt. I've been looking into certain irregularities in several Wyoming towns, including Benton." Hope flared in Vivian's chest. "You've been investigating Mayor Wilcox, among others." "Your journal entries that Marshal Harker forwarded to the governor's office corroborated evidence we'd already begun collecting." Harrison smiled slightly. "Your arrival in Silverdale and Wilcox's pursuit has actually accelerated our timeline." "What does this mean for us?" Lucas asked. "It means," Mayor Edwards said with evident satisfaction, "that when Mayor Wilcox attempts to present his evidence at a meeting I've called for 7 o'clock tonight, he'll find himself facing not just our town council, but also an official investigation into his own activities." "We'll need your testimony, Miss Daniels," Harrison added. "Everything you discovered about Benton's finances, every detail you can recall. Are you willing?" Vivian straightened her shoulders. "More than willing, Mr. Harrison. I've been waiting for the chance to tell the truth since the day they banished me." "Good. Then I suggest you both prepare yourselves for what might be a contentious evening. Mayor Wilcox will not surrender his power without a fight." As they left the marshal's office, Vivian felt a strange mix of dread and vindication. The confrontation she'd been fearing since leaving Benton was finally at hand, but not in the way she'd anticipated. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked as they walked toward the hotel. "I think so. It's just I never expected justice might actually be possible." He took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "You stood by the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. That courage is being rewarded." The town hall meeting that evening proved to be everything Harrison had predicted, and more. The large meeting room was packed with curious Silverdale residents, who had quickly learned that something extraordinary was unfolding in their usually quiet town. Mayor Wilcox, a portly man with an overbearing manner, launched immediately into accusations against Vivian, presenting doctored ledgers and fabricated witness statements claiming she had stolen from Benton's treasury before fleeing. Deputy Fletcher, his arm still in a sling from Lucas's bullet, added dramatic testimony about being ambushed while lawfully attempting to apprehend a known thief. When they had finished their presentation, Mayor Edwards calmly introduced William Harrison, who proceeded to systematically dismantle their evidence. He presented telegraph confirmations from 3 former Benton council members, who had recently confessed to participating in Wilcox's corruption schemes under pressure from the territorial investigation. "Furthermore," Harrison continued, "we have documented proof that the $200 Mayor Wilcox claims Miss Daniels stole was actually withdrawn by Wilcox himself the day before her banishment, likely to create the very pretext for the charges against her." The room erupted in murmurs as Wilcox's face flushed dark red. "This is outrageous. You have no authority here, on the contrary," Harrison interrupted smoothly. "I have the full authority of the territorial governor. And as of this moment, you are under investigation for embezzlement, corruption, and abuse of power." He nodded to Marshal Harker, who stepped forward with 2 deputies. "You and Deputy Fletcher will remain in Silverdale under house arrest until formal charges are filed." What followed was chaos. Wilcox attempted to flee, but was quickly apprehended. Fletcher reached for his gun despite his injured arm, only to find himself facing not just the marshal's deputies, but Lucas as well, who had moved with lightning speed to position himself between Fletcher and Vivian. When order was finally restored, Harrison asked Vivian to present her evidence. With a steady voice, she detailed everything she had discovered about the corruption in Benton, the misappropriated funds, the fraudulent land seizures, the falsified records. The citizens of Silverdale listened in shocked silence as the full extent of Benton's corruption was revealed. Miss Daniels risked everything to expose this corruption, Harrison concluded. Far from being a thief, she is the victim of powerful men who would stop at nothing to silence the truth. The governor's office commends her courage and will ensure she faces no further persecution. The meeting ended with Wilcox and Fletcher being escorted to rooms at the hotel where they would remain under guard until they could be transported to the territorial capital for formal charges. Harrison informed the gathering that officials would be sent to Benton to conduct a full audit and potentially place the town under territorial administration until honest government could be established. As people filed out of the meeting hall, many stopped to express their support to Vivian. She accepted their kindness with grace, though the emotional toll of the confrontation was beginning to catch up with her. Lucas remained steadfastly by her side throughout, his quiet strength a comfort in the storm of events. When the last well-wishers had departed, he guided her gently outside into the cool evening air. "It's over," he said softly. "Really over." Vivian took a deep breath, the reality of it washing over her. "I can go back to Benton if I wanted to. Do you?" Lucas asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice for the first time since she'd known him. She looked around at Silverdale's Main Street, at the newspaper office with her name on the sign, and finally at Lucas himself, this man who had risked everything to stand beside her. "No," she said with absolute certainty. "Benton was my past. Silverdale is my future." She reached for his hand. "Our future if you want that too." The smile that lit his face was answer enough, but his words sealed the promise. "I want that more than anything, Vivian. I love you." "And I love you, Lucas Thornton." Under a canopy of stars, with the weight of false accusations finally lifted from her shoulders, Vivian sealed their declaration with a kiss that felt like the beginning of everything. Epilogue. 1 year later, the afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the Silverdale Sentinel office, casting golden light across the desk, where Vivian was putting the finishing touches on the next day's edition. The headline announced the official completion of Silverdale's new schoolhouse, a project the newspaper had championed since its inception. A year had brought remarkable changes, both to the town and to Vivian herself. The Sentinel had flourished, expanding to twice-weekly publication with a circulation that now reached neighboring settlements. Vivian had hired 2 apprentices, including young Tommy Harris, who had proven to have a natural talent for typesetting. Mayor Wilcox and his conspirators had been convicted of multiple crimes, with Wilcox himself sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison. Benton was slowly recovering under new leadership, though many residents had chosen to relocate to more promising communities, including Silverdale. The bell above the door jingled, and Vivian looked up to see Lucas entering, his smile as warm as the day they'd first arrived in Silverdale together. "Almost finished?" he asked, crossing to place a kiss on her forehead. "Just checking the final layout," Vivian confirmed, returning his smile. "The schoolhouse dedication deserves prominent coverage. Mrs. Edwards will be pleased. She's put her heart into that project." Lucas leaned against the desk. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." The word sent a flutter of excitement through Vivian. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Lucas Thornton in a ceremony at Silverdale's newly built church, with half the town in attendance. Almost. Martha Miller arrived this morning. She's staying with the Simonses at the hotel. She brought the most beautiful quilt as a wedding gift. Sam couldn't make it. "Someone has to watch the homestead," Vivian said with a smile, "but he sent his regards and a fine leather saddle for you." Lucas nodded appreciatively. "That's Sam, practical to the core." The livery stable had prospered under Lucas's ownership, expanding to include a small horse breeding operation focusing on the sturdy, intelligent mounts that were in high demand throughout the territory. His reputation for fair dealing and excellent horsemanship had spread, bringing customers from as far away as Cheyenne. Their courtship had unfolded naturally in the months following the confrontation with Wilcox. Lucas had proven to be as thoughtful a suitor as he was a business partner, respecting Vivian's independence while offering unwavering support. When he proposed at Christmas, beneath the large pine tree in the town square that had been decorated with paper stars and candles, Vivian had accepted without hesitation. Now, as their wedding day approached, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together from the desperate flight from Benton to the life they'd built in Silverdale. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, recognizing the distant look in her eyes. "How strange life can be," Vivian replied. "If they hadn't banished me from Benton, I might never have found all this the newspaper, Silverdale, you. I'd have found you somehow," Lucas said with quiet certainty. "Even if it had taken years, I believe we were meant to find each other." The simple conviction in his voice warmed her heart. "And now we have the rest of our lives together. Speaking of which," Lucas said, straightening up, "I have something to show you. Can you leave Tommy in charge for an hour?" Curiosity piqued, Vivian handed the final layout to her apprentice with instructions for its completion. Lucas helped her into her coat and led her outside where their horses waited. "Where are we going?" she asked as they mounted. "You'll see." They rode for about 20 minutes along a well-maintained road that led out of town toward the foothills. As they crested a small rise, a clearing came into view, and in it, a house. Not large, but solidly built of timber and stone, with a wide porch and windows that caught the afternoon light. "Lucas," Vivian breathed, reining in her horse. "What is this?" "Our home," he said simply. "If you like it." They dismounted, and Lucas led her up the path to the porch. The door was unlocked, opening to reveal rooms that were empty but full of promise: a large living area with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with built-in cupboards, and off to one side, a room with large windows that faced east. "I thought this could be your study," Lucas explained, watching her take it all in. "For writing when you're not at the newspaper office. The morning light would be good for reading." Vivian turned in a slow circle, overwhelmed. "When did you do all this? How?" "I've been working on it for months with help from Sam Miller and some of the men from town." His expression was a mix of pride and uncertainty. "The land is halfway between the newspaper office and the livery, 10 minutes ride to either. I thought it would suit us both." "It's perfect," Vivian whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Absolutely perfect." Relief washed over his face. "Really? You're not disappointed it's not in town? Lucas Thornton, after all we've been through, do you think I'm afraid of a short ride?" She laughed through her tears. "Besides, this is," she gestured around them, "this is the home I've dreamed of my whole life without even knowing it." He crossed to her then, gathering her in his arms. "I want to give you everything, Vivian. A home, a family, a lifetime of happiness." "You already have," she murmured against his chest. "From the moment you rode beside me out of Benton, you've given me more than I ever thought possible." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across what would soon be their land, Vivian Daniels and Lucas Thornton stood in the home they would share, planning their future with the same courage and determination that had brought them through their past. Tomorrow they would be married, beginning a new chapter in a story that had started with banishment and found its way to belonging. And in the years to come, when their children asked how they had met, they would tell of a journey that began with loss but ended in love, of how they had found each other on the long road from Benton to Silverdale, and built a life together in the wild heart of Wyoming territory. The newspaper Vivian established would continue for generations, becoming a respected voice in Wyoming's development. The Thornton livery would evolve into one of the territory's premier horse breeding operations. And their home in the foothills would expand to accommodate a family, 3 sons and a daughter who would grow up knowing the value of truth, courage, and standing beside those you love, no matter the cost. But all of that lay in the future. For now, as Lucas and Vivian lingered in their new home on the eve of their wedding, They knew only that whatever tomorrow might bring, they would face it as they had faced everything since that fateful day in Benton together.